preservation of affordable housing. It's the only part of redevelopment funds that can be spent anywhere geographically. The rest, often called the 80%, for an obvious reason, is what funds everything else. So the legislatures allowed us to borrow from our affordable housing and to take that $75 million, there's actually a $63 million payment, another $12 million is due on May 10th, and make the payments to the city. So that was helpful, but it means that we have $75 million that we have to pay back to ourselves and for the affordable housing. So that's one obligation that's there on top of the debt service. Another obligation that we have, expectation that is conventional in there, is that the redevelopment agency pays for the debt service on the convention center. Now we're looking at a convention center expansion to meet modern requirements of conventions, but we still haven't paid off the old convention center. So the debt service on that building is still there. Similarly, the 4th Street garage with the nice banquet facility for the Rotary Club, that is still in mortgage, and redevelopment is paying debt service on that city facility at that point. Similarly, historically, the redevelopment agency has paid for city services and programs that are directly related to redevelopment. As an example, 25% of the mayor and council services have been paid for by this fund because they also serve as the redevelopment board. And the number of folks in planning, code enforcement, other places are paid for out of redevelopment funds in either direct or indirect ways, which I won't go into. So if you take that and you kind of put it here, not only do you have the debt service to worry about, but you have a series of obligations and expectations that the redevelopment agency, above and beyond the debt service, has been paying over years. The last one I want to talk about, because it's very much directly relevant to the next piece, is the county. There are a number of legally delegated payments and pass-through payments that go to the county automatically anyway. In addition to that, we have come to a series of agreements with the county where we pay them additional money. This is primarily related to the creation of strong neighborhoods. When we created the strong neighborhoods redevelopment area, we did not want the county to sue us. One of the ways we got the county not to sue us is we said, as we collect tax increment in North San Jose, we'll give you some money, and every time we bond, we'll give you some more money. So we were making actually a double series of payments to the county. There was an annual payment, around $20 million, and every time we bonded, they got a percentage of the bond as well. So we're sort of paying in a double way. Now, if you think about, well, why would you agree to that? It's useful to go back in your mind, if you can, to 2000, or 1999. I moved here in 1998, and it felt like all you had to do to catch money was kind of put a net out and you know, have a 19-year-old with a good idea, and you could make $1 million is what it felt like. So it was an overly generous, perhaps, agreement with the county, but nonetheless, that was the agreement with the county. So those are all the obligations that have resulted in, for us, very, very dramatically, the $30 million cut in capital dollars for strong neighborhoods and the 16 staff that we have lost. So, what's on the table to change this? The proposal, which is moving forward even more rapidly than I had anticipated when I spoke to you last, is the proposal to take tax increment from the strong neighborhoods redevelopment area. Now, a couple of things on this. One, I want to say it's not a new tax. So if you are in the strong neighborhoods, you would not be paying any more tax now or later as a result of this. It is a redistribution of this increment. So just like I said before, it would be capturing more of that increment for redevelopment with less of the increment going to the county and the city. Let me take a moment here to, is it useful to explain the school district piece, or should I kind of keep plowing through at this point?
I think you just yeah, thank you.
Okay, so let me explain the school districts, because it's certainly something as a parent of two that's near and dear to my heart. How are school districts affected by this? In the state of California, there are basically two types of school districts in terms of financing. There are basic age school districts, which counterintuitively do not get aid from the state. They only get the basic level of aid from the state, and depend for their revenue on property tax. And then there are, I forgot what the term is.
I know, and you
I always
were
call it,
thinking about it.
I always call it non-basic aid. That's not what it is. There's another word for it. But
Revenue limited.
revenue limited school districts. So a revenue limited school district, and this is what I'll spend most of the time on. Of the school districts in strong neighborhoods, all of them except for one are revenue limited. So this is the majority of the school districts. San Jose Unified School District, East Side Union High, everything except Campbell Union is a revenue limit. What happens if you're a revenue limited school district? Let me do it over here. This is a bit crazy. So, first of all, I have to explain how revenue limited school districts are funded. Revenue limited school districts are funded primarily by the state on the basis of average daily attendance. This is why school districts freak out, or they should, when they have truancy or absentee problems. In fact, I don't understand why they don't freak out more. The ADA, not in this case American Disabilities Act, but average daily attendance, is a formulaic way of saying you have X number of students, a little more complicated than that, and you get Y amount of dollars. X number of students equals Y amount of dollars. So it says here, you are entitled to this revenue limit of this amount of funding. The state will bill you up to this revenue limit. Now, what happens is that the school district in question is capturing property tax, right? They're still getting property tax. But in this case, the property tax, let's say, only comes up to here. So the property tax fills the bucket here, and the state says, well, for equity purposes, we're going to fill you up to your revenue limit. What happens in the non-basic aid school districts is that their property tax is actually higher than the revenue limit, and the state says, okay, we don't have any obligation to you beyond basic aid, so you're on your own. But in a revenue limited, the property tax is here, and the state funding is here. Now, clearly, as you start to collect increment, this is going to be effective. Now, what happens over time? It's pretty interesting and not necessarily what you'd expect. So, what happens is that rather than this property tax increasing, right, the increment is now being captured by the redevelopment agency. So, let's say over time that it's sort of like this much. Well, an interesting thing happens with that. Clearly, the school is still funded at the same level. But what happens is AB 1290, a legislative bill, created the requirement that there is a pass-through back to the schools. So the agency collects that increment, or the county collects that increment, and rather than it going into the redevelopment agency, it is passed back to the schools. Here's the really cool part, if you like finance. If you don't, it's just boring. That money gets split in half. It's not exactly half. It's about 48-point-something% and 50-point-something%, but half and half. Half of it that goes back to the school gets counted as property tax. Right? And so the state amount, they get to keep it, it's property tax, and the state amount drops. Oh, we don't have to backfill it. The other half, and this is the super cool part, goes back to the school district, but isn't counted as property tax, and is in fact a new revenue source that they get to spend however they wish, because it's an unrestricted general fund for them. So there is an advantage to the school districts to be in a redevelopment area if they are revenue limited, because what it means for them over time is that they have an increasing share of their funding which goes above the revenue limit and which is at their disposal. So it's actually an advantage to the school district over time for revenue limit. It's so much an advantage that there have been some laws that you can't backdate the base year, because the school districts would all want to say, oh yeah, let's make 1980 the base year so that we can rake in the gravy like this. Okay? So that's actually good news for what I'm going to talk about, because it means that For all of our revenue limited districts, they actually stand to benefit from a collection of tax increment in strong neighborhoods. Is there a clarification question? See one here and here. Steve?
Okay, maybe I lost it somehow. So the money, how does redevelopment get any of that money?
We don't. So the redevelopment increment really doesn't come from the school district at all. Technically, it does, and then it gets passed back through. The redevelopment increment, the real losers, if you will, are the county, the city general fund, and special districts, not including the school districts. That's water district, fire districts, things like that. Okay, so, yes, I'm sorry, Gracie. And Elsie.
My question is, you mentioned that Campbell School District is apart from this.
Yeah.
What about Evergreen?
No, Evergreen is revenue limited. Yeah, Campbell Union is the only one, and there's a small portion of it. We're going to be figuring out what the implications are for them. We think at this point they come out sort of even, but we want to do some more calculations before we sit down with them and talk to them about it.
I was under the impression that Evergreen District was an independent district, not a county.
Oh, it's not a question of whether they're independent or not. It's a question of whether how much property tax they gather. So it's not a question of how they're governed. Okay,
I
Elsie.
have a question.
Please.
If most of, well, darn near all schools in San Jose are revenue limited. So if you've got property tax paying so much, state paying so much, and then at some point in time they're actually building up an excess, what responsibility do they have in using that excess in reinvesting in the school as opposed to coming out every year and asking the voters to give them yet more money?
Well, that's the individual governance issue, right? Each board each school board is responsible for determining how these funds are spent, and this is part of their responsibility. I don't want to portray it as like schools are sitting on piles of cash like how much cars I.
Well, it's just being responsible.
But this is some additional income over time that is significant for them. Let me get a little bit farther along, if I might. So, a couple of interesting things here. This is today. Look at 2018, because it's a fun year, and 2028, and 2038. Okay. So this is sort of the span of thinking you need to have to understand some of this, though the present is, of course, very important to people. So this is the traditional, I'll do it in orange so we can see it a little bit. This has been our historic North San Jose piece right here. Now the idea and the plan that's underway is to begin collecting tax increment from the Strong Neighborhoods Initiative areas. Now the idea is that you would use the existing boundaries, you have to make an amendment to the existing redevelopment plan. That plan amendment has to essentially confirm the finding of blight that we originally made, and has to add in the power of tax increment. We could have had tax increment at the beginning if we wanted to. We chose not to add it in. We chose, somewhat ill-wisely, I believe, to add in eminent domain instead. Which eminent domain, by the way, is expiring in the Strong Neighborhoods Redevelopment area in 2014. We will no longer have that power after 2014. So you start collecting at some point in the next couple of years, tax increment from redevelopment. And it doesn't start at 0 because the base year is 2002, the adoption of the plan for a few of the different pieces. So there's a little complexity around that, but you don't start at absolute 0. And you begin to collect the increment and theory and history.